I spent every remaining dollar of my retirement pouring it into my daughter Vanessa's dream of becoming a power manager in the music industry, only to sit frozen in the front row of the Academy's showcase auditorium on my 58th birthday, while the poorest contestant in a field of 100 girls opened her mouth and delivered a performance that made the entire room forget how to breathe. The place was packed with industry scouts, streaming executives, and parents who had dropped 6 figures on private coaches. Crystal chandeliers hung over velvet seats that smelled of fresh polish and old money. I had paid for Vanessa's glossy management launch party, her downtown loft, the leased Mercedes G-Wagon parked out front with her custom plates. All of it funneled through a joint account I had stupidly kept open because she was my only child, and I still believed blood meant something. 100 girls had auditioned, polished, trained, Instagram-ready. They sang covers of chart toppers with perfect runs and designer outfits. Then the last name on the list stepped forward. Riley Kane. 19. Foster system product. Second-hand black boots scuffed at the toes, a plain grey hoodie 2 sizes too big, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No stylist, no entourage. Just a girl who looked like she had ridden 3 buses to get here and still carried herself like the stage already belonged to her. Vanessa had spent the entire week before the showcase trash-talking her in my kitchen. She called Riley the charity slot, the pity pick, the girl who would prove real talent always rises above the rabble. I had nodded along because it was easier than arguing with my own daughter. Riley adjusted the microphone once, closed her eyes, and started singing an original piece she called Bubble Glee. The first note hit low and smoky, like smoke curling from a cheap candle. Then it built, layer by layer, a melody that felt like joy forcing its way through cracked concrete. Her voice cracked on purpose on the second verse, not from weakness, but from raw honesty, and the entire auditorium leaned forward as if she had hooked every single heart in the room. No auto-tune, no backing track tricks, just truth wrapped in music so alive it made the chandeliers seem to vibrate. When the last note faded, silence slammed down harder than any applause I had ever heard. Then the room exploded. People stood. Judges who had sat through 99 flawless but forgettable performances were on their feet. The head producer, a man whose name appeared on platinum records I used to play for Vanessa as a child, walked straight onto the stage and shook Riley's hand like he had just discovered the future. The decision took less than 5 minutes. Unanimous. Riley Kane won the entire development deal. $250,000, a year of studio time, and a guaranteed single release on a major streaming platform. Cameras flashed. The live stream chat probably crashed. I should have been happy for talent winning. Instead, I felt the first cold ripple of dread when I turned and saw Vanessa's face in the wings. Her expression was not disappointment. It was something uglier. Pure, venomous disbelief that the universe had dared contradict her plan. Back in the green room an hour later, the mask came off completely. Vanessa paced in her 4-inch heels, voice low and vicious, telling the Academy director that Riley must have cheated, that girls from group homes always had dirt, that someone needed to run a background check right now. I stood in the doorway holding the birthday flowers one of the other mothers had handed me, watching my daughter unravel. She finally noticed me. "You cannot possibly think this is fair," she hissed, jabbing a finger toward the stage door. "That girl has nothing, no training, no connections. She's going to embarrass the entire program." I said nothing at first. The weight of every dollar I had transferred into her management LLC sat heavy in my chest. $33,400 in the last 14 months alone, according to the statements I had glanced at that morning. I had told myself it was seed money. Later that night, back at my house in the hills, Vanessa left her cashmere coat draped over the back of my dining chair, still smelling of the stale designer perfume she wore like armor. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and opened my laptop. The first red flag was small. A wire labelled VPM Consulting that I did not remember approving. Then another. Then a line of credit application with my forged signature attached to my paid-off house. I sat there until 3 a.m. with yellowed bank statements spread across the table like autopsy photos. Vanessa had not been building a management company. She had been running a quiet grift with me as the walking ATM. She had paid off 3 academy assistants to spread rumours that Riley was unstable. She had leased that loft and that G-Wagon in my name. She had even floated the idea to one judge's assistant that it would be better for everyone if the poor girl simply didn't show up on showcase day. And all of it while smiling at me over Sunday brunch, calling me mum, and telling me how proud she was of my sacrifices. I closed the laptop and stared at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time in years, I did not feel heartbroken. I felt something cleaner, cold, focused. I poured the rest of the bourbon down the sink, set the glass in the sink with a soft clink, and opened a new browser tab. I typed in the name of a forensic accountant who specialized in family financial abuse cases. Then I searched for estate attorneys who handled irrevocable trusts. Vanessa had spent 27 years thinking she could drain me dry and still keep me in her corner. She had no idea she had just handed me the match that would burn her entire world down. The house was quiet, except for the soft beep of the new security system I had installed that afternoon while she was still at the academy doing damage control. I armed it, walked upstairs, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow I would start playing the role she expected, the frail, generous mother who just wanted to support her ambitious daughter. Inside, the woman who had spent decades balancing corporate books and raising a child alone was already calculating every move. Riley Kane had won that night with nothing but her voice and her truth. I was about to win something far more permanent. With paperwork. With numbers. With the kind of cold justice that leaves no room for second chances. That same night, while the Academy's after-party lights still glowed across the city skyline, I sat alone at my dining table, with every bank statement from the last 36 months spread out like evidence at a crime scene. The joint account I'd kept open for Vanessa's convenience now stared back at me with transactions I had never authorized. $33,400 wired to V, Prestige Management LLC, in neat, recurring bites of $928 a month. I remembered signing nothing. I remembered her telling me the money was going toward legitimate artist development. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional soft beep from the new security panel I had installed while she was still out celebrating what she thought was her victory. Her cashmere coat still hung over the chair, carrying that stale, cloying perfume she sprayed too heavily to cover the scent of whatever lies she told during the day. I left it there, untouched. By 4 a.m. I had printed everything. Line of credit applications against my fully paid house, with signatures that looked like mine, but carried the tiny tremors of someone forging under pressure. Lease agreements for the downtown loft and the Mercedes G-Wagon, both in my name, both with automatic payments pulling from my retirement drawer. I even found transfers to 3 different Academy staffers, Small enough to look like consulting fees, large enough to buy silence and planted rumours. Riley Kane was unstable. Riley Kane had a violent history from the foster system. Riley Kane would tarnish the Academy's reputation. The messages had been copied and forwarded in carefully worded threads that never named Vanessa directly. Smart. Almost. I did not cry. I did not call her. Instead, I opened a fresh notebook and started logging dates, amounts, account numbers. 40 years as a corporate accountant had taught me how to follow money the way hunters follow blood trails. By sunrise, I had a timeline that made my stomach turn. Over 14 months, Vanessa had drained $187,000 while telling me she was building something we could both be proud of. She had even convinced me to increase my monthly transfers because her big break was always 30 days away. I waited until 9 a.m., then made 2 quiet calls from a new prepaid phone. First, to a forensic accountant named Marcus, who specialized in elder financial abuse cases and asked 0 questions when I told him I needed absolute discretion. Second, to an estate planning attorney who could move fast on irrevocable trusts. I scheduled both meetings for the same afternoon, telling Vanessa I was going for a routine doctor's checkup. She sent back a heart emoji and told me to rest because I deserved it. The words tasted like rust in my mouth. Marcus met me in a nondescript office downtown. He reviewed the documents I slid across the table and let out a low whistle. Forgery on the line of credit alone was enough for criminal charges. The payments to Academy staff opened the door to bribery and tortious interference. He recommended pulling full transaction histories, including crypto wallets he suspected she was using to layer funds. I authorized everything. I also asked him to run a parallel trace on any accounts linked to Riley Kane. I needed to know exactly how deep the sabotage had gone. By late afternoon, the estate attorney had drawn up the initial paperwork. I created an irrevocable trust, naming myself as settler and Riley Kane as the primary beneficiary for her music education and living expenses. The remaining assets, once protected, would be unreachable. My house, my remaining retirement accounts, even the small investment portfolio I had hidden from Vanessa years ago. I passed the mental competency evaluation with flying colours. The doctor noted I was sharper than most people half my age. I played the part perfectly when Vanessa came by that evening. She breezed in wearing new designer sunglasses, complaining about how the Academy was dragging its feet on finalising Riley's contract. I nodded, poured her a glass of wine, and asked gentle questions about her plans. She relaxed. She even hugged me and whispered that once the deal closed, she would finally be able to take care of me the way I had taken care of her. The lie slid off her tongue so smoothly, I almost admired the craftsmanship. Inside, I was already gone. The next 3 days, I fed her just enough money to keep digging her hole deeper. Another $10,000 transferred to her LLC under the guise of supporting the winner's launch. She thanked me profusely and immediately routed most of it toward the overdue lease payment on the loft. The paper trail grew fatter. Marcus sent encrypted updates showing she had contacted a private investigator to dig dirt on Riley's foster history, hoping to leak something damaging before the streaming contract finalized. I installed additional cameras inside the house, the kind that triggered on motion and sent footage straight to my new secure cloud. I changed the security codes. I quietly transferred the title of my car into the trust. Every move was silent, precise, documented. Vanessa started pushing harder. She mentioned how stressed I looked, how maybe it would be easier if she had power of attorney, so she could handle the finances while I focused on resting. She said it with that soft, concerned voice she used when she wanted something expensive. I told her I would think about it. I even printed out the form and left it on the counter like I was considering it. Every night I sat at the same dining table, yellowed receipts and fresh statements piling higher. The bourbon glass stayed empty. I drank black coffee instead and kept working. The colder I became, the clearer everything looked. Riley Kane had stepped onto that stage with nothing but her voice and walked out carrying a future. Vanessa had stepped into my life with my last name and tried to walk out carrying everything I owned. One of them would keep what she had earned. The other was about to lose it all. I armed the security system, listened to the familiar beep, and allowed myself one small, tight smile in the dark hallway mirror. The setup was almost complete. The days that followed blurred into a carefully orchestrated performance of my own. I became the ghost in my own house, smiling at Vanessa while every move I made tightened the noose I was building around her future. She texted me constantly, little love-bombing messages about how much she appreciated my support and how the Academy executives were finally seeing her vision. I replied with exactly the right amount of warmth, sent another $12,000 when she mentioned cash flow issues with the streaming negotiations, and watched the forensic reports stack up in my encrypted inbox. Marcus, the forensic accountant, worked like a machine. Each morning he sent updates showing fresh layers of deception. Vanessa had routed payments through 2 shell companies I had never heard of. She had leased additional equipment in my name and even opened a small crypto wallet using my social security number. The trail was no longer thin. It was a highway of evidence leading straight to federal wire fraud territory if we pushed it that far. I kept playing the frail, grateful mother. When she dropped by unannounced, I made her favorite lemon tea, listened to her complain about Riley's sudden rise, and nodded when she said the girl was clearly being pushed by people who wanted to undermine real professionals. She left her laptop open once while she took a call in the backyard. I copied the files she had been reviewing, including drafts of emails suggesting Riley's past foster placements made her a liability for the Academy's brand. The irrevocable trust was already signed, sealed, and filed with the county. My estate attorney had moved faster than I expected once the mental competency evaluation came back ironclad. Riley Kane was now the protected beneficiary for the house, the remaining retirement accounts, and a dedicated education fund that would cover studio time, coaching, and living expenses for the next 5 years. Vanessa could not touch a single cent even if she dragged me into court. The document sat in a safe deposit box across town, waiting for the right moment to surface. I drove to the Academy myself on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, under the pretense of delivering paperwork for Vanessa's management agreement. The director, a woman I had met at the showcase, remembered me as the supportive mother. I asked casually about security footage from the night of the competition, mentioning a concern about missing personal items. She hesitated only a moment before granting access to the green room cameras. What I saw on that grainy feed made my blood run colder than any bank statement. Vanessa's assistant, a sharp-faced woman in her late 20s, had slipped into the green room 20 minutes before Riley performed. She knelt beside the microphone stand Riley would use, made a quick adjustment, then slipped something small into her pocket. The timestamp matched perfectly with the performance. Later analysis by a sound engineer Marcus hired confirmed it. A tiny piece of adhesive tape across the diaphragm that caused just enough distortion to make most voices sound thin and unstable. It had been removed right after Riley's set, probably while the room was still cheering. The sabotage had been real, and it had failed only because Riley's raw talent had punched straight through the interference. I downloaded copies, paid the director a discreet consulting fee for her time, and left without another word. Vanessa's pressure ramped up that same week. She started dropping by daily, always with that concerned tone she had perfected over the years. She told me I looked exhausted, that the stress of the showcase had clearly affected my mind, that it would be so much easier if I signed over power of attorney so she could handle the boring financial details while I rested. She left the forms on the kitchen counter next to a fresh bouquet of flowers she had bought with my money. I let them sit there, untouched, while I nodded and said I would consider it seriously. Inside, I was steel. I met Riley once, in secret, at a small coffee shop near the bus station she still used. She showed up in the same scuffed boots, eyes wary but steady. I told her only that I believed in her voice, and that certain obstacles were being removed. I slid an envelope across the table containing prepaid studio vouchers funded through the new trust. She tried to refuse. I insisted. When she asked why, I simply said some debts needed to be paid and left it at that. Her performance of Bubble Glee still echoed in my head every night. That song had not just won a contest, it had cracked open something in me I thought had died years ago. The tension in my own house grew thick enough to taste. Vanessa started bringing friends over, the flying monkeys who echoed her narrative about ungrateful outsiders stealing opportunities. They sat at my dining table drinking my wine and talking about how Riley would never last once the industry saw her real background. I smiled, refilled their glasses, and memorized every name. Marcus already had files open on 2 of them. By the end of the second week, the trap was almost set. The Academy had scheduled a grand finale event to announce the full rollout of Riley's deal, complete with live streaming and industry guests. Vanessa was counting on it as her victory lap. She'd already ordered new business cards with my address listed as the company headquarters. I spent the night before that event at the dining table again, fresh manila envelopes lined up like soldiers. One contained the full forensic report. Another held the Academy security footage timestamps. A third carried the trust documents and the preliminary civil complaint for financial abuse, forgery, and intentional interference with contractual relations. The bourbon glass stayed empty. The security system beeped softly as I armed it for the night. I stood in the hallway, looking at the family photos still hanging on the wall. Pictures of Vanessa as a little girl, when I still believed she would grow into someone decent. I left them there. They would make better evidence later. I was no longer the walking ATM. I was the ledger coming due. And when that paperwork finally dropped in front of her, in front of everyone she had tried to impress, there would be no screaming loud enough to drown out the truth. The grand finale event at the Academy was billed as a celebration of new talent. But for me, it became the stage where every lie Vanessa had built finally collapsed under the weight of undeniable paper. 2 weeks after I had locked the last pieces of evidence into place, the auditorium was packed again with 400 people. Producers, streaming executives, Academy donors, and the same polished parents who had sneered at Riley on showcase night. Crystal chandeliers glowed brighter under fresh lighting rigs. Cameras rolled for the live after-show special. The air smelled of expensive cologne, fresh-cut flowers, and the faint metallic tang of opportunity. I arrived early, dressed in the same quiet navy suit I used to wear to corporate board meetings. No drama, no tears, just a black leather briefcase and 2 companions. My estate attorney, a sharp woman named Elena, who had reviewed every document 3 times, and 2 US Marshals in plain clothes, carrying sealed federal packets. Security knew me as the supportive mother. They waved us through without questions. Vanessa stood near the front row in a new emerald dress I had unknowingly paid for, laughing with industry guests and gesturing toward the stage where Riley's name now dominated the digital banners. She spotted me and waved, her smile wide and practiced, already counting the night as her personal victory lap. She had no idea the walking ATM had been replaced by a ledger demanding full payment. The program began with speeches. The head producer praised the Academy's commitment to authentic voices. Riley performed a stripped-down version of Bubble Glee again, and the room once more fell into that rare, reverent silence before erupting. I watched from the side aisle as her voice filled the space, raw and unbroken, the same scuffed boots planted firm on the stage. When she finished, the applause rolled like thunder. Then the MC invited select guests on stage for the official contract presentation. Vanessa practically floated up the steps, positioning herself beside Riley like a proud manager ready to claim credit. That was my cue. I walked down the center aisle with Elena and the marshals. Every head turned. Vanessa's smile faltered when she saw the serious faces behind me. I stopped at the edge of the stage, opened the briefcase, and began handing documents across the table where the producers sat. First came the 30-day eviction notice for the downtown loft, served in my name as the legal lessee, demanding she vacate the premises and return all keys. The property manager had already changed the locks that morning. Next, the thick forensic accounting report. $187,000 in fraudulent transfers over 14 months, complete with forged signatures, shell company routing, and crypto layering, traced back to accounts in her control. Bank statements highlighted in yellow spilled across the polished wood like blood evidence. The lead producer's eyes widened. Cameras kept rolling. Live chat exploded somewhere in the digital ether. Then the civil complaint package. Forgery, financial abuse of an elder, tortious interference with prospective business relations, and bribery of Academy staff. The restraining order followed, temporary but immediate, barring Vanessa and 3 named associates from any contact with me or Riley Kane, effective upon service. Finally, the recorded deed transfer showing my family house and remaining retirement assets had been moved into the irrevocable trust, with Riley as sole beneficiary for her music education and living expenses. The trust was bulletproof. Even if Vanessa sued, she would hit a wall of steel. Vanessa snatched the top document, her hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. She scanned the eviction notice, then the trust deed, colour draining from her face in real time. The auditorium fell into a stunned hush, broken only by the soft click of camera shutters and the distant beep of a phone recording everything. She started screaming that I had lost my mind, that the charity case had manipulated me, that this was elder abuse in reverse, that I was being gaslit by people who wanted to destroy her career. Her voice cracked higher with every accusation, echoing off the chandeliers while 400 witnesses watched. She lunged toward me, but one marshal stepped forward and calmly reminded her that violating the restraining order would result in immediate arrest. She froze mid-step, mascara already running, emerald dress suddenly looking cheap under the harsh stage lights. I said nothing. I simply slid the final manila envelope across the table toward her. Inside were copies of the green room's security footage, showing her assistant tampering with Riley's microphone, time-stamped and notarized. The sound engineer's affidavit confirming the sabotage. The printed texts where she had coordinated the smear campaign. Everything. Vanessa stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. Her flying monkey friends in the audience began shifting uncomfortably, phones suddenly silenced. One producer quietly asked security to escort her off the stage. She resisted at first, still shouting that blood was blood and I would regret this. But the marshals guided her firmly toward the side exit, while the cameras followed every stumble. I remained standing there, hands steady, as the weight of 27 years of quiet enabling lifted off my shoulders. Riley watched from the other side of the stage, eyes wide but steady. I gave her the smallest nod. She had earned her future. I had simply stopped funding the destruction of mine. The event did not recover its sparkle. Sponsors pulled out of Vanessa's management LLC before the night ended. The live stream captured the entire takedown, and by morning, it had spread across every industry board and gossip thread. Her carefully built image as the next big manager lay in shards on that polished stage floor. I walked out of the auditorium into the cool night air without looking back. Elena confirmed every document had been properly served and filed. The marshals noted the service in their logs. My house, now Riley's protected asset under the trust, would remain untouched. The loft would be cleared within 30 days, the line of credit frozen, the joint accounts severed. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not joy yet, but the clean satisfaction of balance restored through law, numbers, and unrelenting proof. Vanessa had spent years treating me like an ATM with an expiration date. Tonight, the machine had printed its final statement, and the balance read 0. The days after the grand finale unfolded with the merciless precision of a ledger balancing itself. Vanessa's management company, The Prestige Management LLC, collapsed within 48 hours. Sponsors who had watched the live stream saw the forensic reports, the eviction notice, and the trust deed splashed across every industry feed. Contracts were terminated by email, and an overcoming on the cloud, where is the trust? Contrast were terminated work by the Engindy industry feed. Contrast we didn't find it everything of the most brand just for their informated. Contrast was trying to deep the loss of Watch the Live. Contrast was just bled and placing the chust, but the most figures it of unsmall in palation. The amendment traced the just didn't be weight, the first interested in primarity, but know that the blood walk internally just to teach the most brand. The most blend chord is invaded before the vision and anyone that work that the clive owned by run that ladia on soft chord. Contrast who had watched the live stream saw the forensic reports, contrast were terminated. Contrast who had watched the live stream saw, she smit bled and promated. The first who had the lame that ladia, which invaded, they raised the live, that worg about the bled in turn feed. Contrast who had the function for the first made, the trust is made up the world. Contrast who had watched the live stream saw, that is the round of most start of most bled, but no, the anything that ladia contrast the round. The first they would see that provently self, that they would was lect the other sit of watching through. The first who had watched the live stream, the first who had watched the live stream. The first who had watched the live stream, the death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream, the first who had watched the live stream. The first who had watched the live stream, the death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream, the death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream, the death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream, the death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream, the death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream, the death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream, The death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. Splash Drakos the live stream saw the forensic reports is the trust began. The first was light forgetter and forgetter. They found that reports believe in fortunately. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream, which is watching through the part of no, they would set to the trust, the invaded buyer, watching them to reviewed plan for the part of note. The first who had watched the live stream. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first what we completely meta-roded, the evanation when the friends of the cars of Goth. The first who had watched the live stream. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first who had watched the live stream. The death is well completely help. The first work was infinimated from the enginedy and sulfed chord. They would seen to live in Vadia with ever today. The first work was equal to completely. They will be to live. The people is posish. The first was also maded where the world. They will absolutely set they won. The other conditions of really of spurt. The first was never six for them to take. The first was absolutely marved, but they both of constantly. They would make the most bled particularly, the anything of what. The first was maded protected by world, but they will with intentnet. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. The first was maded protected by world, they will with intentnet to curb the most. Splash Drackles the live, they will be able to be. It was never believe at the point was bled in which me of watching through. It was never believe it the bled in which me would first pushent from me. It was never believe it the bled in which me would all awe of watch. It was believe that the bled in out and to twister, they would never believe it the bled. It was never believe it which set me on to intelligent. The first was becoming all of alternal, that just set in factor. It was also maded because there is of really watch, the which me would all of watch. It was also maded because there is also maded because there is also maded we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. It was also mated because there is also mated we never know. Were terminated by email before sunrise the next morning. The downtown loft, now subject to the formal 30-day eviction, had its utilities cut by the property manager, acting on my instructions. The leased Mercedes G-Wagon was repossessed from the parking garage where she had left it, keys still inside after she fled the academy in a rideshare paid for with the last usable card in her wallet. I received daily updates from Marcus and Elena. The civil suit for financial abuse, forgery, and elder exploitation was filed in Superior Court that same week, backed by the full forensic accounting package and the Academy's security footage. A criminal referral went to the District Attorney's Office for wire fraud and identity theft. Vanessa's attorney tried to negotiate, sending letters claiming family misunderstanding and offering mediation. Elena returned them unopened with a single note. All communication would be handled through the court. I did not answer her calls. I did not read the voicemails that piled up on my old phone before I had the number disconnected. The security system at the house logged 3 separate attempts by her to enter using old codes. Each time the alarm blared, cameras captured her frantic face under the motion lights, and the footage fed straight into the restraining order violation file. The court issued an enhanced order within days, expanding it to a 1,000-yard exclusion zone around both me and Riley. Riley Kane, meanwhile, stepped into the protected future the irrevocable trust had secured for her. The same label that had nearly been swayed by Vanessa's bribes now fast-tracked her into a professional studio. I watched from a distance as she recorded her first official single, a polished yet still raw version of Bubble Glee that carried the same honest ache I had heard that first night. The trust fund disbursed exactly what she needed for coaching, session musicians, and modest living expenses. No more, no less. She sent one polite thank you note through Elena. I replied only that the money had always been meant for talent, never for theft. No further contact was necessary. I sold the big house in the hills 3 weeks after the takedown. The realtor listed it as a motivated sale. Escrow closed fast once buyers learned the title was clean through the trust. I kept nothing sentimental except a single photo of Riley on stage in her scuffed boots, which I placed inside the new, quiet condo I bought outright in a gated community across town. The place had reinforced doors, a state-of-the-art security system, and cameras that covered every angle. I armed it every night with the same soft beep that had become my new lullaby. There was no goodbye dinner, No final confrontation where Vanessa cried and I wavered. I simply changed the locks one last time, forwarded all mail to a P.O. box, and walked away. The click of the deadbolt and the beep of the alarm arming behind me felt more final than any courtroom gavel. Blood had meant nothing when weighed against years of calculated draining. I felt no guilt, only the clean satisfaction of boundaries drawn in steel and enforced by law. Vanessa tried one last desperate move a month later. She showed up at the academy during Riley's first showcase, mascara already running, begging security to let her in so she could apologize to her mother. The enhanced restraining order violation notice was served to her on the sidewalk in front of witnesses. She was escorted off the property while Riley's voice carried through the open doors, strong and unhurried. I sat in the front row again, anonymous in the dim light, feeling the weight of every fraudulent dollar return to its rightful purpose. The management company was dissolved by court order. Remaining assets were liquidated to offset part of the judgment against her. She declared bankruptcy, but the fraud charges kept rolling. Last I heard through Elena, she was living in a cheap extended-stay motel on the edge of the city. Her designer clothes sold off, her flying monkeys long gone once the money dried up. I never reached out. I never checked on her. The woman who had once carried her as a baby no longer existed in any meaningful way. The mother she had tried to bury under debt and gaslighting had risen instead as the architect of her ruin. 6 months later, I sat once more in a darkened theatre, this time at Riley's first headline showcase. The tickets had sold out in hours. Her voice filled the space with a new song that built on the same spirit of bubble Glee, but now carried the edge of survival earned the hard way. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me, unburdened for the first time in decades. No more joint accounts, no more forged signatures, no more Sunday brunches laced with manipulation. Just the quiet condo, the armed security system, and the deep satisfaction of cold justice, delivered not with shouting, but with paper that could not be ignored. Vanessa had learned the hardest lesson of all. When you treat someone like an ATM, eventually the machine prints the receipt that ends you. And I had made sure the final balance read exactly 0. 6 months later, the theatre lights dimmed again. But this time, the energy in the sold-out venue crackled with genuine anticipation instead of manufactured industry polish. Riley Kane's first headline showcase had tickets gone in under an hour. Her name glowed on the marquee in clean white letters, no asterisks, no caveats. I sat in the front row centre, anonymous in a simple black jacket, the irrevocable trust papers long since filed and working silently in the background like a well-oiled machine. The condo I now called home waited across town, title clean, security system armed, every trace of Vanessa's name erased from my accounts and my life. I had not spoken to my daughter since the night the marshals escorted her off that academy stage. The civil judgment against her stood at $412,000 and climbing, with interest and legal fees. The district attorney's office had moved forward with wire fraud charges. Her public defender was already negotiating a plea that would include restitution and probation. None of it concerned me anymore. Elena handled every filing. I simply signed where instructed and transferred the proceeds from the house sale into Riley's Education Sub-Trust. The ledger was balanced. The chapter was closed. The side doors opened briefly during the final pre-show check. I caught the motion from the corner of my eye. Vanessa slipped in wearing a cheap hoodie and sunglasses, hair unwashed, mascara already smudged from whatever tears or rain had hit her on the way. She moved low along the back wall, whispering desperately to a security guard, trying to use my name like an old key that no longer fit any lock. The guard checked his tablet, then calmly served her the updated restraining order violation notice on the spot, enhanced with GPS monitoring requirements after her third documented attempt to approach the venue. 2 uniformed officers appeared within seconds. They escorted her out through the same side door while she hissed that this was still her family, that blood meant something, that I would regret abandoning her. I never turned my head. I simply waited until the side door clicked shut, then allowed myself one slow, ice-cold smile that barely touched my lips. No words, no satisfaction performed for an audience, just the quiet knowledge that the woman who had drained my retirement accounts, forged my deeds, and tried to sabotage a 19-year-old with nothing but talent had finally run out of doors to open. The house lights dropped completely. Riley stepped onto the stage in the exact same scuffed black boots she had worn the night she sang for her life. No stylist, no flashy outfit, just the grey hoodie and the ponytail. The audience leaned forward as the first spare piano chords of Bubble Glee filled the theatre. Her voice came in low and smoky again, then built with that same unstoppable joy pushing through every crack life had ever tried to seal shut. The melody wrapped around every person in the room, honest and alive, exactly as it had the first time. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. For the first time in decades, there was no calculating the next transfer, no bracing for the next request, no pretending that love could survive systematic financial abuse. The trust fund dispersed its monthly allowance to Riley without drama. The condo's security system beeped softly each night when I armed it. My new life had clean lines and iron boundaries, enforced by court order and irrevocable documents. Vanessa had chosen to treat me as a walking ATM with an expiration date. She had forged signatures, layered payments through shell companies, paid bribes to silence real talent, and smiled while doing it. Tonight she stood outside in the alley, probably watching the marquee lights reflect off wet pavement, while the girl she tried to destroy sold out her first major show. The final chorus swelled. Riley's voice cracked once on purpose, raw and perfect, then soared into the last note. The theatre erupted. I opened my eyes and stood with everyone else, clapping until my hands stung. No tears, no lingering ache for the daughter I used to carry, only the deep, unburdened satisfaction of cold justice executed with precision. Outside, the city moved on. Inside my chest, something I had not felt since before Vanessa learned how to manipulate, settled into place. Pure, quiet freedom. I walked out of the theatre alone, past the side alley where security still held the perimeter. I did not look for her. I did not need to. The final balance had been struck months ago, and it read exactly 0. The walking ATM had closed its account. The mother who once enabled everything had become the architect of its end. And somewhere in the quiet condo waiting for me, the security system would beep softly when I armed it for the night, sealing another perfect, bloodless victory. No forgiveness. No second chances. Just paper, numbers, and the irrevocable truth that some family ties deserve to be severed with the cleanest possible cut.